and welcome to another episode of the Molten Truth. As you know, I'm your host, Zoey Michaels, and today we are here with Trevor Harrison. And Trevor is an author. We've had a variety of guests this season. We've had musicians, authors, and a few other in between. But Trevor here came to writing, I guess, for entertainment late in life, but written during his professorial years. So I'm going to let Trevor do the talking because he'll do much better than I will. Trevor, thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you, Zoe. Very much pleasure to be here. Yeah, so just so your audience knows something about me, I actually was a professor of sociology at a university for some 30 years or so. And, I published all kinds of academic tomes and, was pretty successful at it. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, well, someday maybe I can go back to this other professorial life where I was kind of writing poetry, interested in writing travel stories. And so when I retired 2.5 years ago, I already had kind of a bank of things I wanted to go back to. So last year, I actually brought out a, book called Tales This Side of the Elysian Fields. And it was a collection of short stories about really before I began an academic career, traveling around, typical stuff as a young man working at horrible jobs. They make for entertaining stories. And and after bringing that out more recently, I actually brought out a couple of books of poetry as well, which again, in my teens, early 20s, I used to write poetry. So that's kind of, as I said, it's a start of a new career in some sense, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Very cool. So I have found that when it comes to poetry, there's, I don't know if there's just the two extremes or something in between, but the ones that are just sad, and then the ones that are just upbeat and happy. So where are you in the spectrum of poets?
Yeah, that is a fabulous question, and you're absolutely right. There's some poetry that is so down it almost chases you to a bridge nearby, and then there's other ones that you just want to start dancing. Well, in some ways, I said I brought out these two books of poetry, and partly it was because thematically they both are a little bit different, and so they didn't fit together really well. The one here you can tell by the title, and it's somewhat ironic. War and other inconveniences is we do live in fairly troubled times, but for some people reading it, it could be construed as a pretty downer of a book. So the other one I brought out is this nice little book, Poetry Without Borders. And it's a little bit happier. It has a few poems in there that will talk about birds and things. Um, but so I think some of my poetry sort of straddles a little bit between both, but I try to leave the reader with a fairly hard image about something that will make them think. And I think that's what poetry, in a very condensed way, the way novels make you think, a short poem can also make you think if it's written reasonably well. So
I would definitely agree with that. So I mean, both of your books are just the titles themselves are so fascinating. The one because yes, I completely agree. We are in troubled times. I mean, I cringe every time I open up my news app. I'm like, what's happening now? What kind of craziness is going on in the world? And part of me just doesn't want to know.
well, I greeted somebody the other day. I was working out at the gym and I saw a friend of mine there, and I my first comment was, "What fresh hell hath come today?"
Yes, right. So true. So I was tickled that you had the other extreme in your book title about just without borders because I love the variety of the world we have. There's so
Mhm.
much flavor, literally and metaphorically, based on the different cultures around the world. So I love that about the other book title.
Yeah. Well, and the Poetry Without Borders also is. in some ways more introspective, more personal, as opposed to the other one, which is kind of standing outside and looking at the world. But as I said, I've always had a interest in writing poetry. Some years ago, actually, after a wonderful trip to Japan, I was working there for 4 months, and I brought out a book after out of that experience, and it was a very wide-ranging book, put it that way. But among it, I actually included a number of haiku poems. And I'd never tried writing haiku poems before, but while I was in Japan, I got fascinated with it. So I did that too, and they came out in that book. So, yeah.
Nice. So then, did you take that then with other countries you visited and kind of write based on that culture, or just your own experiences, the thoughts while you were there?
Yeah, as you were mentioning, I have traveled a fair amount. The last couple of years, actually, I've been traveling to Southeast Asia. So I think my travels in one way or another, whether directly talking about the countries or their poetry or whatever, does sort of influence what I'm doing. Poetry Without Borders actually has several different sections within that are kind of hived off from each other. And one of them is called the Greece poems.
Okay.
So there's about eight of them about Greece and my experiences there, and that's because I'm actually very fond of Greece. I've been there going back to when I was 20 the first time. I've probably been there about 10 times, and I'm still suffering through trying to learn the Greek language, but I will push ahead and I will become a full-fledged Greek speaker at some point. But so again, that country kind of influenced me to write a good deal about what I've seen there and experienced.
Absolutely. You know, initially when you said Greece, my mind went to pop culture and not to the country. So I kind of it took me a minute to go, oh right, he doesn't mean the one with John Travolta. He means Greece, the country. But but it's a fascinating thing about that country with its language, because I've always heard that that language is so precise. I'm a Bible student, so I know enough to know
Okay.
that the Bible was written and part of it was in Greek. I believe it was the Christian side of things, but the reason that language was so good was because of that precision, is what I've always
hmm
been taught. So, what is your take on the Greek language for yourself? What is your thoughts on that?
It is a fascinating language, and in the English language, actually the roots of English go back, in fact, to Sanskrit. So most of the languages, the Indo-European languages, come from Sanskrit. But after that, it's really the influence of Greek and Latin. And so one of the things when you travel and if you're interested in language, you start to understand your own language a bit better. So I'm constantly struck. I'll be using some word in English, and then I'll be studying something in Greek or Spanish or something else, and I'll say, right, now I understand how we got this word in English, right? So it's after all these years, you're kind of learning something because the way we normally speak is like we just learn it like breathing in and out, right? And we don't think about the language. But I think to be a good writer, and this is particularly pertains to poetry, you have to pay attention very precisely to the language itself. To each word has to have kind of a resonance, a meaning, how you're using it. It's not a throwaway. My one of my favorite quotes actually from Ezra Pound, who of course was an editor of T.S. Eliot, but also wrote his own poetry. And Pound used to say that poetry should be, how do you say, hard as stone and white as bone, meaning it should be very clear and very concise. And so, in my poetry particularly, but even in my other writing, and I continue to learn things about writing, uh, I strive to find the word or series of words that conveys in the most clear way for my readers what I want to convey. And I think most writers actually try to aim for that at least.
Right. Well, true. Whether we're telling a story or poetry, it would make sense. Words are precious, and you want to get the right thought across as succinctly or as artfully as possible, depending on what you're writing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yes, I would definitely agree with that. So, I'm trying to think here. My mind keeps going back to my great aunt. My great aunt was the family poet, and she, in
Okay.
fact, produced a book. Now, hers was not nearly as polished as the ones we see today, ones like yours, but for the time period, and we're talking about like late 70s, early 80s, it was okay. I had actually purchased it off of Amazon more as a sentimentality thing than anything else. It's like, oh, this belonged to my great aunt, and she had done it as a collection of poetry of various poets, which included herself. It turns out one of my aunts and maybe another cousin, but then others locally. I'm guessing from the South Bend, Indiana area, which is where she was from.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's where my mind keeps like going back to that with the poetry. Um, Never an area that I chose to explore outside of, I don't know if it counts if you're writing song lyrics. I guess it's somewhat lyrical, somewhat poetic, but in my
That's
case, it was for the purpose of healing, kind of talking myself down from some things. So,
right.
but I don't consider
That
myself a
that's
poet.
that's an interesting point. I mean, and I actually had a fascinating discussion with a friend of mine who is was he just retired as a dean of music at a university. And we were talking about music and lyrics, and I said, well, we should discuss lyrics that outside of the song itself stand alone. They're readable, they're poetic, versus some songs it's all about melody and the beat or whatever, and so the lyrics aren't terribly important at all. So there's some writers though that I just offhand I can think someone like Don Henley, of the Eagles.
Yes.
I think writes really interesting, innovative lyrics. Obviously, somebody like Bob Dylan again, or I think Joni Mitchell again. But then
Yes.
there's other people I can think of that it's kind of background music, but you wouldn't pay it to say, "Hey, I got to listen hard to this lyric." But I think you're right. The writing really good lyrics for music can, in some ways, stand alone as being poetry as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting, one of those fine line division things, and it depends on what their purpose is. I do think too it depends on, are they writing the music first or are they writing the lyrics first? Because I think if they're writing the lyrics first, that does fall into the poetry realm more so than when you do the reverse. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's what
Well,
comes to
no,
mind.
yeah, and then of course you sometimes get teams of writers who are one does the lyrics and one does the music itself. So Elton John basically does the music part, but Bernie Taupin does the lyrics. And I've read about how they actually do it. Sometimes Taupin has these lyrics, and he kind of to Elton John. He says, "Hey, what do you think this?" And he reads it over, and he comes up with a tune for it, and they go back and forth, right? But there's a bit of a division of labor going on there, and yeah, it's a all creativity though is whether it's painting, music, writing is a fascinating idea of how you get to that point.
True. Just the thought that, being creative, and, people sometimes comment, oh, I'm not creative. But perhaps it's just that they haven't found that creative area in their life yet. Or perhaps they're more creative than they realize. It's just they're so focused on other things.
Yeah, I think one of the unfortunate things sometimes in our society, and it happens, I think, fairly early on. I always say that most people are far more creative in different ways than they even know. But what happens sometimes early on is before they get a chance to really test it out, somebody comes along and says, "Well, that's not very good. That's a really lousy painting," or or you couldn't sing a note or whatever. And so we have a kind of a cruel culture sometimes that rather than encouraging people to just explore, and I do think that most people, to one extent or another, maybe you're not going to be a Rembrandt, maybe you're not going to be an Elton John, but most people have some talent to do something in music, writing, painting, whatever, sculpting, so
Agree. And sometimes we're even our own worst critic. You know, I spent probably 30, 35 years thinking, I can't paint. And that was because of a school situation where I felt like my work was not very good. It certainly wasn't, you know, I don't even remember what the grade was, to be honest. But I just remember thinking, nope, it wasn't very good. I'm not cut out to paint. And that was the last I gave any thought to that.
well, you
And
need to fight against those voices,
yeah,
even the inner voices, and come
hmm,
back and try it again.
well, exactly.
This may be a good point for me to actually, mention here is
Yes,
the Poetry Without Borders book. I'll hold up here. People can kind of look at the picture that's on the front there, and
that's a
I'll
great
also
picture.
hold up the title page for Tales This Side of the Elysian Fields. Uh, Both of those, the covers, are actually done by a friend of mine who, again, in post retirement, she was actually a counseling therapist, and but she retired and she decided she'd take up painting, and so she took a few lessons, and and it was like, okay, how far will this go? She has become an amazing painter, and we're talking only over the last 4 years. Good enough that when this last poetry book I was putting it out, I said, I need a cover for this. What do you got? And so she showed me this particular painting. I said, wow, that just fits the theme of what I'm aiming at in this book. So, and she continues to impress me. I've seen more recent things again, and it's so we all have talents that are, maybe I should take up painting here in the next while as well.
Exactly. The thing is just to explore it and not necessarily rely on the past. There's that saying the past doesn't equal the future, and it's so true when it comes to creativity.
That's true, and if you enjoy doing it, you don't want to set yourself the goal of, as I said, yeah, overnight you're going to become Rembrandt. Maybe you never will be, but if you enjoy doing it, go out and do it. And my experience is that people who enjoy doing something usually they do get better and better at it
Well,
because
exactly.
that spirit of enjoyment enters into it.
Mhm. And I think too, perhaps the caliber of the one instructing you. Um, in my case, you have a man who may or may not have been burned out, and he's teaching a class full of kids who may or may not care. And that's certainly going to affect the way that perhaps someone who maybe isn't Rembrandt, isn't super, super talented, just naturally, but perhaps there's something there that could be. I discovered later in life by going to a party a friend gave where we did get some very good instruction that, all right, I can paint. And yes, I was painting the same pictures everyone else, but then I went off on my own tangent and added things that no one else thought to add. So that created in me the desire to move forward and explore painting. And I am never going to be able to sell my art, but I certainly enjoy doing it.
If you enjoy doing it,
Yeah,
yeah, positivity is infectious. So if you're around positive people who are giving you encouragement, who knows, the sky's the limit.
exactly. The thing is to open yourself up and explore, whether it's writing poetry, creating a song, creating art, or some other creative art out there that I can't even think to mention at this moment. Um, but I'd say we
Yeah,
all need that in our life.
think of there's any number of occupations where you don't necessarily think of them as being creative endeavors, but someone who's an architect,
Yes.
I think is incredibly. In fact, sometimes when I'm in other countries and I'm seeing these amazing buildings that go back thousands of years, and I think, boy, I think I would if I enjoyed being an architect. Just the challenge of putting together a building or something in a very interesting and beautiful way. I think it was must make architects feel really good at the end of the day.
I would think so. And the way that they have to think, I want to say is like three dimensional. It's one thing to paint a flat picture and
Right.
get the dimensions, but they have to think about people are going to enter in this way, they're going to turn to the left, and then there's this here. The intricacy of what they have to put together, that they can even visualize that to me is unfathomable. I can't think that the way that they have to think, and thank goodness they do, so that we
Hmm.
can enjoy the places that they
That's
design.
right. We'd hate to exist in just a two-dimensional space.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think if I was going to build a place, I would literally build four walls, cut a hole, and then move on and build another four walls. And you'd have this crazy maze of a place that didn't make any sense because what do I know? So thank goodness that they do know.
Yeah. But yeah, there's all kinds of fields, and lots of people don't themselves actually interpret what they're doing as a creative thing, but they put themselves into it, whatever it is. So
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a pity, it feels like even though there's some wonderful structures, there's so much cookie cutter. I don't know if it's that way in Canada so much, but I look at neighborhoods that have the same floor plans or the same three or four floor plans. It's just same, same, same. And I think back to when I was very young and how much creativity, some houses that had character.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
progress is good up to a point, but I do prefer places with character that had some real imagination.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I live here in this city of Lethbridge, southern Alberta. It's a little over 100,000 people now. But I grew up in a city much larger that's north of here, Edmonton. And you go to the old neighborhoods and you see all these very distinctive houses. Yeah, there might be some similarities, but each house is not, as you said, cookie cutter. Couple of things has actually happened there is many of those houses used to be built by lone individual builders. So if they were building houses, and a couple of the houses I lived in as a kid was this way, that builder might be building three or four houses, but they didn't have enough money to go building a whole bunch of them all at once. And so each one had a kind of distinctive quality to it. It was almost like the signature of that person building it. But what's happened over time is, of course, big builders now, these are large corporations. They have lots of money. Many times they're not just building in one city; they're building everywhere. And so it's easier for them to build the same house over and over and over again. It's kind of mass production houses. And so that individual craftsman thing that you used to get has kind of been lost. When you travel to old countries that are older, have older streets and houses, you see, wow, that is really distinctive. That's a beautiful house right there in the middle of this whole street, right? So, yeah, I sympathize with that memory.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I had the experience, courtesy of my ex-husband, that I got to live out of the country for about a little under a year in Ecuador. And
Okay.
so it was interesting the amount of detail in their architecture, more so inside. Outside, you had your, concrete block construction,
Right.
type of stuff. It was nothing really appealing on the outside, except for there were a few. But inside, the amount of detail on the ceilings and on the walls and the flooring and just the talent that went into that in the simplest of homes. It was just
Right.
like, wow, we in the States are poor by comparison for the artfulness of the interior there. It was amazing.
And and they make it beautiful because that's where they live. They're living inside there, right? And this is an expression of themselves. Wonderful experience. I've never been to Ecuador, but I'm sure that was a great place to go. And how long were you there?
About 9 months altogether. After nine
Wow.
months, I was ready to come home and have some familiar things around me, but it was a wonderful experience. It's one that I
Yeah.
look back to with a lot of pleasant memories, a lot of nostalgia, and I think, I would love to, go back down there and have coconut ice cream again, or try this thing again, or catch like the market in Otavalo that's in northern Ecuador is very nice. It's a lot of Americans settle in that area near Otavalo and Cotacachi, and so I enjoyed that area very much, as well as Cuenca. Cuenca, oh my goodness, it's like how I you would think Europe would be. It has that European feel, of the
Oh,
city
okay.
up in the mountains, 70 degrees year round. All these rivers within view, within the city. There's like three different rivers that run through this city, and you've got a lot of European flavor because of all the um, people who've settled there who are not necessarily Ecuadorian. It's a mixture of Ecuadorian and people from Italy and people from other areas. So it
Long,
had
long
such a
history
nice
of
flavor.
Spanish settlement. Is that
I
the kind of the
think
history of the area?
could
Yeah.
be,
Okay.
could be,
Very
but
interesting.
yes,
Yeah.
super nice. And oh my goodness,
Yeah.
70-degree year-round weather up in the mountains. Who wouldn't love that? So
Sounds wonderful. I might end up buying a ticket tomorrow.
I recommend it. Cuenca was amazing. It was probably my favorite place in all of Ecuador. But yes, it was very good. So aside from, okay, tell me more about Elysian Fields, because that one's more of a book and not poetry, correct?
That's right. So I start out with a what I call it's not really a biography. It's just a few short notes about my life growing up, where I grew up as a kid till about 19. And then I go into a series of stories, and some are, as I said, about work. One is working on a railroad for a few months. Really hard work, fascinating, humorous stories. Wouldn't want to do it for the rest of my life, so I didn't. And then some travels to my first travels actually overseas to Europe when I was 20, when I went to Spain, actually down to the Canary Islands, and Italy and Greece when I first fell in love with Greece. And then some other trips afterwards to various places, and eventually even to northern India for a period of time. And so it's a collection of just interesting and I think entertaining stories, sometimes very somewhat humorous. And the people who have read it have got a good chuckle out of some of it. But it's really about kind of growing up until your late 20s. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And so you're going from job to job. And the best thing about bad jobs is you do learn what you don't want to do.
That's true. Hopefully, we used to have
Yes,
the
hopefully.
saying
Yeah.
back when I was in mortgages that you work mortgage until you figure out what you want to grow up to be.
Mm.
So it's because it
Yep.
was
Yep.
very demanding, but you figured it out. You figured out that you were going to be a professor. How did you come to that?
Yeah, like a lot of things, I suspect I stumbled into it, and a lot of people sort of stumble into it. What happened was after I came back from one trip overseas, I had not been to university yet, and I decided, okay, I was a little tired from traveling, so I'll take a couple of university courses, and I did, and I did well at it, and it was interesting, and but I didn't immediately actually after that experience decide to be a professor. I actually went back working again at other jobs. I had a wonderful job actually as a social worker for a few years. And then I traveled again a bit, and then I came back, and I thought, okay, well, I'm kind of at loose ends here. What am I going to? Oh, I'll go to university again. So I went back to university, got a master's, and just gradually you end up kind of falling into it. It happened that I was pretty good at what I was doing. It was an opportunity to write, travel. I enjoyed the teaching. And so just kind of gradually your life pulls you or pushes you in a direction that you didn't think about at the start. I suspect there's some people at 23 say, "Oh, I'm going to become a professor." I did not do that.
Hard to
I
imagine,
was
but
traveling, I was doing other things. Yeah, and then lo and behold, oh, I'm a professor. So, and it was a good gig for a few years, but then it was kind of time to move on again.
so then how long were you a professor?
If I count my years as a sessional instructor, which is not the greatest fun in the world, but you do get to, practice your teaching chops and stuff. Altogether, it'd be at least 30 years. As a full professor here at the University of Lethbridge, I was a professor for 21 years. But as I said, I was teaching sessional for a few years before that as well. I had some great experiences. Did this one exchange to Japan for 4 months. I was actually on a Fulbright research scholarship down in Kennesaw State University in Georgia for 4 months. And that was a wonderful experience. I got to travel around the American South and then other kinds of travels and experiences going to conferences and just traveling. So great career.
So let's segue for a second here. So you mentioned Southeast United States. So do you have any favorite memories from that period of time when you were in Georgia and in that general
Oh,
area in the Southeast?
well, if you'll indulge me for a sec, being a
Please.
Canadian, we used to watch a lot of television up here, so I got to practice my southern accent a few times. I'd go up to people and kind of talk to them, and anyway, I seem to pull it off without anybody saying, "Oh, you're a phony." No, I had a wonderful. There was, you always think you know something about a place until you actually go there. And so, like a lot of Canadians, we're somewhat aware of the United States and the South and the Civil War and that. Well, I traveled all over the place to various Civil War sites. I went to the Andersonville prison, there, and my wife, when she came down to visit, we went out to Savannah, which we absolutely loved, and we were in
It's
Charleston.
amazing.
So again, out of my time there, I have great memories of just meeting different people and traveling to different places, and such a such a different part, not just different from Canada, but also a different part of the United States. It's quite
It
unique,
is.
I think,
It has character.
and I enjoyed it. Oh, I was up to Tennessee. We went up to and we I was to Nashville a couple of times and really enjoyed that. So yeah, it was a good time down there.
Very cool. Did you spend much time in North or South Carolina? You mentioned already, Charleston and of course Savannah, Georgia, but any time in North Carolina?
Yeah, we didn't get to North. We were in South for a while, but had to get back to do a few things back at the university I was assigned to. So love to go back there again, though. So one of the things about traveling like that is it never completes the travel. It kind of whets your appetite to go back and explore other things about it as well.
Well, that
So
is
hopefully
true. That
someday.
is very true. Yeah, if you ever have a chance, I'm trying to remember what part of North Carolina, but oh, it's like, oh goodness, now I wish I had a map. There's this cave where in the Civil War period, some folks had hid out in this cave, and
Okay.
it was big enough
Okay.
that they were able to have fire, and there was fish like right outside the cave door because of the way the water ran, so they were able to eat and take care of themselves, but they were found because apparently the smoke kind of gave them away, um, through the crevices somehow
Right.
through the mountain. But oh, I'm gonna have to go back and find that for you afterwards. I'll have to send you an email. But my sister took me there recently. I
Sure.
am not a cave person, never really enjoy them a lot, but this one was kind of cool because of that backstory. Um, but yeah, that's in like the middle section of North Carolina, a little going
In
towards
the
Charlotte.
in in the hills just around Chattanooga, up in the Tennessee hills. There's a, I guess I can't remember the name either, but famous caves. They've now had it electrical lighting. You can go inside, and it's quite spectacular again. And I think during the Civil War, it also had some prominence as kind of a place to hide. Yeah, Chattanooga was again a really fascinating place. All these mid-sized cities in the United States were really fun to travel to. So
They really are, absolutely. It's near Blowing Rock, North Carolina. That much I can remember because went there on our way to Blowing Rock. But that's about where my memory is.
okay,
But keep it in mind for future travels. So many things, places to choose
indeed.
from. But okay, so at what point did you decide that you were going to stop being a professor and then you were going to start writing books like the ones that we've been talking about?
Yeah, it was, academia is certainly changing in a lot of ways. I think not necessarily for the better. I also saw that, the younger people who were coming in, they were younger, they needed opportunities. People need opportunities to get into the professoriate. It was just time for me to go and to explore doing other kinds of things again. And so there was no one thing. It was just, I think I've done enough of this for now. To some extent, I think it was that the longer you do anything, it becomes almost too routine. And I'm the sort of person I think who needs to be occasionally challenged. It was becoming too easy to do the same thing again and again. And many jobs I've actually had over the years, I ended up, when I could have had a career in them, I've ended up leaving because I've kind of done that and I want to do something different again. And that was very much the case with this, that I wasn't quite sure what I do. I thought I would do some of this other kind of writing, but I knew whatever it was, I was going to do something different. And so far, it's worked out really well. I should say, actually, I'm right now working on a collection of, this time, fictional short stories. So the other one was kind of non-fictional memoirs. This
Okay.
actually exploring writing fictional short stories is a good deal of fun, and it again is stretching me to yeah, it's kind of fun so far.
Sounds good. Did you just start working on this new one, or how long ago did you start work on this short stories, the fictional ones?
This one I've more or less started to really work on since probably last spring, last summer, but I've really got on it the last few weeks here. But there were a few stories that I had it almost in my head, or I even put down on paper, an outline for a kind of an interesting story. And those go back in some cases 40 and 45 years.
Very cool. And so, do you have a goal as to when you hope you'll be able to publish it? Like a timeline? Hmm. Yeah, well, right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's on my want to do list myself. I'm not going to be able to do it this January, but someone I had interviewed several months ago had told me about this workshop with some very like well-known writers, like Hollywood level writers, but they for people who write books, and it's like a 3 day workshop where they help bring your writing game to a higher level, as well as learn how to deal with finding publishers, finding the literary agent, so on. So that's on my wish list for 2027. January 2027 to do that. I hope, if I can get my life in order. But yeah, we need that kind of knowledge and help. And unfortunately, there's so much misinformation and people out there who are, maybe they are legitimately, trying to publish people's books or trying to, be their literary agents, but they are not qualified, and you end up in this horrible mess of, how do I know that you're qualified, and how do I know that you're someone I can trust to take my work and make it where it needs to be. So I like the idea of going in person. Go ahead. The writers union. Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm with you. And I like you, I or maybe not like you, I don't know. I have no interest in my book ever becoming a movie. If it does, wonderful, yay. But that's not my goal. My goal is simply to make sure it finds its audience, and that I am able to write another book down the road that finds its audience. My goals are pretty simple. But just making sure that it's a trustworthy literary agent, make sure it's actually a publishing house that's going to not charge you a fortune to market your book, but in fact pay you to put that book out there, and then take care of getting your marketing, helping you find your audience. The thing that all of us really want. So if you haven't figured it out, I'm exactly, exactly. I mean, again, cool if it's possible, yay. But it's about just, why should you have to pay someone for the privilege of publishing your book? If it's a good book, then they should be paying you, or they should be putting your book in a position where it will sell. And if it doesn't sell tons of copies, fine, but at least you're not going to be out of pocket trying to promote something that maybe shouldn't have been out there in the first place. But you know in this world of self-published, and I'm not dying self-publishing. Totally think that's fine, but just not being taken advantage of in the process. That's the thing. I don't want to see people taken advantage of because they chose to self-publish. Oh, but that's a whole other conversation. So we're exactly. Well, I tell you, when I told my friends that I was writing books, my friend started watching documentaries about people who had been scammed because they'd written books and things. So she's been there making sure that, hey, pay attention, make sure that you're checking these people out, and you know, and thank goodness for people who have your back that way. Because unfortunately, the world we live in, like your first book of poetry you showed, it's a crazy world, and we have to be careful. So as we get down to toward the end of our program here, first of all, do you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share with our audience? Mm, that's right. Or listen to my crazy anecdotes that have nothing to do with anything. Sounds good. We have Orlando making his appearance. He's our guest on every episode, it seems like. Hello. All right. So we're getting down to our random question from the previous guest. The last guest asked the question, what is one quirky thing about you that you are hesitant to admit to people? It's all right. It works. And so if you like porridge, you probably liked Southern grits when you were down south too, then. They seem to be kind of distant cousins, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like porridge and grits are definitely in the same family. Okay. And then have you had a chance to figure out a random question for the next guest? I like that. Another period of history. Would you like to live in? You are not obligated to answer that. But go for it. Go. What are you gonna say? Right. I did kind of wonder briefly, and I thought, well, the word history kind of, negates that. But I thought, yeah, what if someone did jump to the future, and what would they imagine the future would be like? That thought did occur to me. So true, it's flexible. Sounds like a deal. Or I might actually ask both. Maybe I'll do that to them. Like, well, usually we have one random question, but we've got both ends of the spectrum for this one. So I don't usually do this, but out of curiosity, how would you answer your question? When would you want to live if you could choose? True. Plus indoor plumbing. Which was the first thought that I thought of. It's like, can I live in any period of time but still keep the indoor plumbing? Yeah, I know. What can I say? Well, there we go. That's where I would have to be. Actually, I think the city of Ur, like even further back than the Romans too, was supposed to have had indoor plumbing. So again, just choosing the right location. True. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Built to last, built with integrity. That's the most amazing thing. Yeah, not this cookie cutter stuff. Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I think about. I mean, modern convenience, there's some good things about it, but yes, compared to things that were built to last, I think I would rather be further back in time when things were built to last that were made to just with quality and integrity. But boy, you and I could have a whole nother conversation on that one alone, couldn't we? Yeah, I think we'll have to. We'll have to. Same here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you. If you like this episode, please, share it with friends. Like, click. Trevor, do you happen to have a website? Okay. And otherwise, look on Amazon for Trevor Harrison. Look for his books. You've seen the covers, so I did a Google search before our show. He's easy to find. Thank you for joining us, and make it a great day.